Hi there, I'm Thompson on behalf of Indie Structural Productions, and welcome to another homebrew episode. Before we get started, though, I need a cup of coffee. That's much better. So, in today's video, we're going to go over how I approach oiling a guitar. Now, this guitar in particular, this is the IP Daedalus prototype. So the first Daedalus model guitar from IP. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to have two different approaches in this video. We're going to go ahead and we're going to oil just a natural finish guitar, and then we're going to go ahead and oil a guitar that has stain on it. And I'm going to show you the kind of different approach you need to take with that. It's not all that different, but there's a couple of little things to keep in mind. So, without further ado, here we go. So, first things first, I am gonna put on some gloves. Alright, now the first layer of oil is gonna be rather substantial. I'm gonna put a lot of oil on there, but instead of applying it with a rag, I am going to use some 1200 grit wet and dry paper. Now, the guitar itself has been sanded all the way up to 320, and then I've done a pass with 800 grit wet and dry, but just drying it off. And the grain has been wet multiple times over, as I did with the staining video, just so that I get a much better finish out of it. Now, the reason why I'm using 1200 in the first application is for a couple of different reasons. The main reason being that, once again, I've noticed that it does a lot for the type of finish. It really does make it a lot better, makes it a lot more shiny, a little glossier. But also at the same time, because I'm using sandpaper, it's kind of doing the final sanding at the same time. So it's two birds with one stone, basically. The very important thing is always make sure that whatever you're about to oil or apply finish to is completely free of dust. I did this earlier, but I'm doing it again. Using your gloves, it's easy because you can see the dust come off there. So, first layer, applying a generous amount. I love this part. This is my favorite part of guitar building. First layer of finish. Now you're going to feel as you're sanding, or as you're applying, you're going to feel how it changes. You can hear the change as well, but you'll feel how you're starting to sand the wood and smoothing it out, sort of. Seems like there's a bit older of an oil that I have. No issues there. Gonna get rid of all the excess anyways. This part's gonna look sick. The same way that I usually always do oiling is, once again, you want to avoid all kinds of drips as much as possible. If you do get drips, even those out pretty quick. That's another good thing about using sandpaper, because you're sanding the drips away if you do get any. So you're sanding them down at the same time. Now, the first layer will seep in a lot because the wood is very dry. And how I usually go about this is in sections. I usually always do the top, then the sides and the back, and then the neck. And if you're going to be applying lemon oil or a restorative oil or some sort of oil onto the fretboard, then of course you want to make sure that you don't get any of this guitar finishing oil on your fretboard. Now, I got a little bit on the sides, but that's not going to worry things at all. So with every layer, you're going to apply what you're going to apply, and then you're just going to take off all the excess oil. And as you do so, you kind of want to buff the wood or buff the oil in at the same time. And the thing is that if you have a type of wood that has a very open grain, you're going to notice that the oil is going to keep on coming out of the grain. So just make sure to get rid of all that, buff it out as soon as you can, so it doesn't like have time to crystallize and harden, because that's just going to be a royal pain in the ass to try and take care of in the later process. A lot of times I don't like using gloves when doing oiling, because your hand starts to sweat inside the glove, and then you can't feel the texture of the oil that you're putting on, which means that you're going to be buffing an area thinking that it's still sticky, while in reality it's perfectly fine. So yeah, then you just repeat the same process all over the rest of the guitar. On the sides, the neck, and the back. It is not rocket science. Because the sides have so much end grain, it's going to be soaking it up a hell of a lot more. Also, try and find yourself a workstation which is the right height, because currently I am working way too high up, which is strenuous to say the least. You can do the same process with 800 or 600 or something like that as well. That's all up to you. I just like using 1200 for the finish I get. Or you can go overboard and do like micro mesh or 2000, 4000, something like that, and go really nuts with it. But the same principle applies. Sandpaper just kind of allows for that really, really smooth feel on the finish, which of course is really nice. Trying to avoid trips. Trying to also see what the hell I'm doing, because I'm working way too high up. The thing is, with oil, it is extremely unforgiving. So if you have scratches from sanding or impurities in your wood, like glue or stuff like that, it will show. And it will show a lot. So just be mindful of that fact, that if you haven't done your prep work properly, you might have to go back after the first initial layer of oil and sand down that layer to fix the issues you have. One of the more common things is if you, for instance, like this is a set neck. For instance, with a set neck, you'll have glue in the neck joint. So that's something that you need to remedy fairly quickly. And once again, just getting some paper towel and getting rid of all the excess. There you go, much better. Now already after the first layer I'm starting to see a very nice sheen on the surface of the wood. And that's just going to keep on getting better and better. What the sandpaper also does is, because it's sandpaper and you're basically sanding wood, while you're applying the oil, you're sanding the wood just a little bit and basically clogging up any grain a little bit more. It's very minimal, but you are doing that basically, which in turn helps you build up a better finish much quicker. All right, onto the back. Yeah, I'm doing, because it's such a high grit paper, I'm doing circles as if I was wet sanding. And nothing wrong with going with the grain at all. It's just, I guess, force of habit from using wet and dry paper specifically for wet sanding most of the time. I'm kind of already doing some of the buffing at this point with the paper, with the sandpaper, and then just getting rid of all the excess with the kitchen towel, or paper towel, I should say. Now make sure you really do get off all of the excess, because anything that gets left behind and not buffed down will dry up and cause issues later on when you have to buff it up. So just aim for extremely consistent finish. At this point you can already see if you have any scratches you need to take care of. Because ideally, of course, you want to get rid of all those scratches at this point instead of, later down the line when you're 5 or 4 layers of oil in, because that would be annoying. Very careful not to get any drips over onto the fretboard. Working with the sandpaper is a little more tedious than just doing this with a rag, but I can assure you that the outcome is well worth the effort, especially when it comes down to the neck, because that's where you really feel the difference of doing this with a sandpaper than with a rag. Perfectly fine to do it with a rag. I'm just telling you my approach on how I go about doing this. This is where not having a proper bench sucks. Alternatively, what you could do is you could have a little pot with oil in it and just dip your sandpaper in there. Come to think of it, why didn't I do that? That would be a hell of a lot easier. My headstock's the last thing I usually do. Paper towel. And buff it up. We are going to let that cure for about 20 minutes to half an hour before doing the next layer. Now, I'm just making my final checks that I have no excess oil anywhere. Because going back and doing the next layer, noticing that I missed something would be a bit of a pain. Alright, awesome. Haven't missed anything, so moving on to the initial oil layer on stain guitar.